For context, I'm from the South, and I'd never experienced a real New England autumn before. It's been on my bucket list since I was a teen, and while I don't think I'm going to die anytime soon, it's never too early to start crossing things off of that list. So when I had the chance, I took 2 weeks vacation in October to finally do it, and drove up to New Hampshire because I heard that was the best place to see the leaves change colors. I researched places for weeks and found this cabin rental near Lake Winnipesaukee through Airbnb. It looked like I'd always thought it would in the photos. Cute, remote, and surrounded by trees that I hoped would be stunning with a color change. I was beyond excited for 2 weeks of hiking, covered bridges, and the whole aesthetic I've been dreaming about. In hindsight, I should have gone with the hotel. I really should have. The cabin was nice enough when I arrived. A small A-frame style, quiet location, and with a good kitchen setup. It was the first night that I started noticing something was strange. The owner had the heat on for me, which was nice. But there was this one spot in the middle of the living room that was straight up cold. Not just a little chilly. It was noticeably colder than the rest of the cabin. I could walk from the warm couch into this area and feel the temperature drop noticeably. I figured maybe there was an air leak somewhere, or the heating wasn't distributed evenly. Except for later, it wasn't only that one spot. Throughout the night, I realized it was moving. I'd sit somewhere for a while and it would be fine. Then, with no reason I could figure out, that spot would turn cold. So I'd move somewhere else, and a while later that place turned cold too. And I do mean cold. It was a goosebumps uncomfortable kind of chill. Looking back now, it was like something was pacing back and forth throughout the living room. I even got up and checked the thermostat, adjusted the heat, and looked for open windows. I couldn't figure it out. By the time I went to bed, I was weirded out but exhausted, so I gave up and went to sleep. The next few days were fine. I was out most of the time anyway, hiking during the day, checking out covered bridges, and exploring the area. I had found a cute little restaurant that served the best clam chowder, and the fall colors were everything I'd hoped for. I'd spend maybe an hour or two at the cabin before bed, and nothing weird happened. I was starting to think the first night was me being overtired. On the fourth night, I was getting ready for bed, brushing my teeth in the bathroom, and I saw something run past the bathroom door. It was a quick flash of something moving fast down the hallway. There was no sound with it, but it still scared the living bejeebers out of me. I immediately dropped my toothbrush into the sink and went to look. There I was with toothpaste running down my chin, looking through the hallway, which was empty. The living room was empty too. In fact, every room was empty. I walked through the entire cabin, checking every closet, behind every door, anywhere I could think of. I never found anything and even considered calling the police, but decided there was nothing they could do. Both doors were still locked, and so were all the windows. I locked my bedroom door to be on the safe side. I slept okay, but I was on edge all night. The next day I got out early and stayed out late. Didn't spend much time thinking about the cabin. I told myself I was overreacting to nothing, but already I was starting to think about leaving early. Night 6 was the worst. I woke up in the middle of the night to a cold feeling, and immediately I knew something was wrong. There was a shadow standing at the foot of my bed. It was human-shaped, and I'd say around 6 feet tall. My entire body went cold. I know about sleep paralysis, and this wasn't it. I was terrified, but I could move. I got out of bed, and the second I moved, the shadow was gone. The presence of whatever it was faded slowly as things returned to normal. I didn't go back to sleep. I went out to the couch and stayed there the rest of the night with all the lights on. After that, I started seeing it sometimes when I was in other parts of the cabin during the evening. a shadow moving through a room or down the hallway. It wasn't as terrifying as it was that one night, and I didn't feel the cold when I saw it. It was walking around like it lived there. I'd see movement in my peripheral, and then look over and there'd be nothing. But I'd know something had just been where I was looking. Eventually, I kind of got used to all of it. It wasn't like it was my house, and I kind of felt like I had a spooky roommate. Except it started to feel like I wasn't wanted there. I'm not sure how to explain this without sounding crazy. It wasn't a scary feeling exactly, more like this overwhelming sense of being pushed out. Like I was somewhere I wasn't wanted, and whatever lived there was tired of me being around. The closer to the end of my stay I got, the worse it became. I'd be sitting in the cabin and feel this weight pressing down on me, letting me know I was an unwelcome guest. It started with just an uncomfortable vibe, but by day 10 it was so strong that I actually couldn't relax. Every time I was inside I felt sick. I would get a little queasy, but more importantly, it was like my body was rejecting being there. I had 4 days left of my reservation, but on night 11 I packed my stuff and drove to a hotel in town. I spent the last couple nights there. The owner wasn't thrilled about me checking out early, but I couldn't stay in that cabin anymore. I needed a place that didn't feel like they were pushing me out. I'm glad I got to experience the New England fall the way I wanted to. The hiking was incredible. The colors were everything I hoped for, and I got to see every covered bridge I had on my list. The foliage alone made the trip worth it, but the cabin experience was genuinely unsettling in a way I'm still not over. If I ever go back to New Hampshire for fall, and I probably will because it was that beautiful, I'm booking a hotel or a bed and breakfast. I don't know what was going on in that place, or why it didn't want me there, but I'm not interested in finding out. I just wanted to see pretty leaves, and I kind of got more than I bargained for. So I've been getting into hiking more over the past few years, and there's this state forest near me that's got decent trails and isn't too crowded if you go at the right times. Freetown-Fall River State Forest. It's loaded with good trails, good distance, and is a nice enough area. But if you spend any time looking into this place online, then you know there are some crazy stories. The Mary Lou Aruda case from the 70s, the cult rumors, all that Bridgewater Triangle stuff. I knew before going in that forest had a reputation. Some of it's true and some of it isn't. Even the parts that are true aren't as true as some would have you think. People like to make things spookier than they are. I'm still not entirely sure what I believe, but I've had enough weird experiences out there that I thought I'd share a few of them. There's more that's happened to me, but these are the strangest ones I can't really explain. And maybe someone else has experienced similar things and can make sense of it. The first thing happened 2 years ago. I was out there in the evening, around 6 p.m. in late fall, so it was getting dim but not totally dark yet. I'm on one of the main trails, just doing a standard hike, and I noticed some lights off in the distance through the trees to my right. My first thought was that there were other hikers with flashlights, but something about them didn't add up. The more I watched them, the weirder they got. They were moving up and down, going maybe 20 feet high or so, and they were too fast to be someone walking around with a light. At one point, they kind of danced, moving in these quick, jerky patterns that wouldn't happen if it was people walking. And they weren't white like a normal flashlight beam. They had this sort of yellowish tint to them. I watched this for like 15 to 20 minutes, standing there on the trail seeing these lights do their thing in the forest. I kind of wanted to go check it out, but I didn't since I know the history of the place. I know people have gone missing there. I know there's been sketchy activity. and I wasn't about to wander off the trail in the dark, chasing mystery lights in a forest with that kind of reputation. So I stood there, watched for a bit longer, then kept hiking and headed out. I told myself there were probably some kind of weird atmospheric light I didn't know about, ball lightning or something, but they moved in ways that didn't make sense for that. Still don't really know what I saw. The next one happened on a Saturday morning earlier this year. I was going in early, around 7 a.m., because I wanted to get a full hike in before it got too hot. The trail was pretty empty, and I didn't see anyone else the entire time I was out there. About 10 minutes in, I started getting this feeling. It was the sensation you get when you know someone's looking at you, that prickling feeling on the back of your neck. Except this was more intense than I've ever felt it, and it didn't go away. I'd look around and see no one on the trail behind me, and no one ahead of me. There was no movement in the trees. It wasn't paralyzing or anything, but it was constant. Still, I knew it was all in my head, so I just kept hiking. It never stopped. For the entire hike, I felt like someone or something was following me or watching me from the trees. It was uncomfortable in a way I couldn't quite put my finger on. The absolute second I got back to my car and closed the door, the feeling vanished. I got in, sat for a second, and thought, oh, that's gone. Then chuckled a bit in relief, and a bit because it was crazy how I was feeling. I don't think it had anything to do with me being in the car specifically. More like that was the boundary where it stopped. I've been back since and haven't felt that way again, so I don't know if it was just that day or what. But for a few hours that morning, something had me on edge, and it wasn't the coffee. This last one still gets to me a little bit if I'm being honest. It was an evening hike, probably around 5:30 p.m., getting closer to dusk. I was heading back toward the parking area because I knew the sun was going down, and I didn't want to be out there in the dark. So I'm walking along at a decent pace, looking forward, and I hear something off to my left, like a rustle or movement in the trees. I glance over to look at what made the noise. Took maybe a second or two. Then when I look back forward, there's a person standing on the trail about 10 feet in front of me. I'm positive there was no one there a second before, but my brain in that moment was trying to figure out if I'd just not noticed them. Still, I'm familiar enough with the trail that I'm confident they weren't there before I looked away. They were walking in the same direction I was going. The first thing I noticed, and this is the thing that made me actually pause, was the way they looked. Their clothes had no color to them, and I don't mean they were wearing black and white or gray. I mean it looked like all the color, all the life, had been drained out of the fabric. And when I looked closer, the same thing was true of the person. The skin, the hair, everything had this washed out, desaturated quality to it. And their clothes were funky as well. They were wearing something that looked like it was from the 70s. Flared jeans or bell-bottoms, and I don't know the exact difference. And when I looked hard enough, I could tell they had a tie-dyed shirt on, despite the lack of color. I kept my distance and my same pace so I wouldn't pass them. The trail had a bend to it up ahead. They took the bend, and I lost sight of them because the turn is blocked by a bunch of trees. When I went around the bend, they weren't there anymore, not even further down the trail, and it's a straight shot for a long ways after that turn. It's possible, but not very probable, that they went off the trail after the bend. There's no reason to go off the trail there, but again, it's possible. People ask me why I still hike there after all this stuff has happened. I don't know if I fully have an answer. These things are strange, yeah, but they're not threatening. I haven't encountered anything dangerous or anything that made me feel like I was in actual danger. It's more like the forest is weird in a way I can't explain, kinda keeps the hikes interesting when you don't know what you'll see next. I've been lucky I haven't run into anything actually dangerous. No sketchy people, no cult activity, none of the stuff you read about online. Only these odd moments that don't make a lot of sense. I keep hiking there because the trails are good, it's close to me, and because I want to know what this place is. I'm not trying to solve any mysteries or prove anything. I just like going out there and seeing what happens. Some hikes are totally normal, and some hikes have something weird attached to them. I don't need to understand it, and as long as I'm safe, I enjoy the weirdness. Back in August of 2020, my husband Matt and I decided to get out of Boston. We'd both been working from home since the spring, and our lease was about to renew anyways. So we decided there was no reason to pay city rent when we didn't have to. We found this older farmhouse about 2 hours north in Vermont near a small town. It wasn't huge, but it had a kitchen, 2 bedrooms, a living room, and 1.5 baths downstairs. Upstairs was an open loft layout, but it sat on a couple of acres with a small barn out back. The landlord said it used to be part of a hay farm back in the day. It had that kind of rustic charm I go crazy for. Wood floors, wavy glass in the windows, and wide porch with peeling white paint. Sure, it had some quirks, but otherwise it was in good repair. When we first moved in, I was completely in love with it. There was a faint smell of cedar and hay from the barn, and at night the crickets were loud enough to drown out the silence that used to make me uneasy. To me, it was a fairy tale house nestled in the forests of Vermont. That summer was honestly one of the best times I can remember. We spent most evenings outside, drinking wine under the string lights we hung up between the trees. It felt peaceful and still compared to the city. Things didn't start getting strange until October. It began with smells, which sounds harmless at first, but they were weirdly specific. The first one was in the guest room. Some mornings, especially when it was damp out, the room would smell like something was rotting. It was overpowering, and I figured something had died in the walls. I tore that room apart trying to find a dead mouse or something in the vent. We even had the property manager send someone to check the crawl space, and they didn't find anything. The smell would be there one day, then gone the next. After that came the cigarette smoke. We'd smell it in our bedroom, usually late in the evening right before bed. It would hang there in the air, a stale, sour kind of smoke that you couldn't get out of your nose. I tried lighting candles and even incense, but nothing got rid of it until the morning. Neither of us smoke, and our nearest neighbor was at least a quarter mile away, so we know it wasn't coming from outside the house. We started to joke about it being our ghost. It was something to laugh about during lockdown when every day started to feel the same. But around Halloween, little things began to move. For example, I'd set my mug on the counter and find it later on the kitchen table. I would ask my husband about it, and Matt would swear I left it there. Then I'd find my hairbrush in the bathroom drawer instead of on the counter, and he'd say he hadn't touched it. It became this ongoing back and forth that turned slightly irritating. We both assumed the other was being absent-minded or teasing. And during lockdown, this began to cause a lot of tension. By mid-November, though, there was something else that changed the mood of the house completely. One night it snowed for the first time that season, and we found a cat sitting on the back porch the next morning. He was this skinny gray and white thing that looked like he'd been roughing the wilds for weeks. His fur was all matted, and I could count his ribs. He looked so pathetic I couldn't just leave him there. We brought him to a vet in town who said he was underweight but otherwise healthy. We got him his shots and did all the things responsible cat owners do. Since the lease said no pets, we set him up out in the barn. I got him this cute plush heated bed, Food, water, even a litter box. And so many toys he didn't know what to do with them all. We named him Tom. Not very original, I know, but he likes it. You can tell by how proud he looks when we call him. Tom adjusted quickly. He'd sleep most of the day and come out at dusk, prowling around the yard like he owned it. He was good at catching mice, so it felt like a fair deal for both of us. But almost immediately after we took him in, the noises started. The first time it was in the kitchen. A cabinet door slammed shut hard enough to make me jump. I thought Matt was downstairs and called out to him, but he was up in his makeshift office on the Zoom call. When he came down, he swore he hadn't heard anything. Over the next couple of weeks, we'd hear what sounded like doors closing. Sometimes the one upstairs to the cleaning closet, and sometimes even out in the barn. One night when Matt went to get something from his car, he came back pale as a sheet. He said he'd heard what sounded like horses neighing from inside the barn. There were no horses anywhere near us. I even checked with the property manager later just to be sure. By December, the guest room had turned into a place we avoided entirely. The smell had gotten worse, and there was this heavy feeling in there. It felt like that room in particular was trying to push us out. One night we were folding laundry in there, and out of nowhere we got into this stupid heated argument about something completely trivial. I think it was about the thermostat. The argument didn't feel like us. It was like we both got instantly irritated for no reason. I'm talking frothing at the mouth, angry at each other. Eventually we were getting into each other's faces, and we walked out of the room so I could prove a point. The second we left that room, it was gone. We both stood in the hallway afterward, confused about what we'd even been fighting over. I was almost in tears, and we gave each other a good hug and said we were sorry. Despite all of that happening, I tried not to think about it too much. There was enough stress in the world that year already, and I didn't want to add haunted house to the list. Then there was the barn. Around mid-December, I went out one night to feed Tom and found him standing in the corner of the barn. His back was arched and he was staring at something I couldn't see. He was hissing and sputtering in that deep guttural sound cats make when they're genuinely scared. I called his name, but he didn't even flinch. Then, out of nowhere, he darted forward, chasing something that wasn't even there. When he ran past me, I felt this wave of cold air that was beyond the freezing wind outside go right through my chest. It made the hair on my arm stand up. Tom bolted out of the barn and didn't come back until morning. After that, he'd sometimes sit staring at corners or hissing at empty spaces. I strongly believe cats can see things humans can't, like spirits and other things like that. Matt acted like nothing was going on, but I could tell he was getting uneasy as well. By late January, we were both sleeping pretty badly. Some nights we'd wake up at 3 or 4 a.m. to what sounded like footsteps in the hallway, or the faint creak of the stairs. It reached a point where we started leaving the lights on all night. I'd even wake up with this weird feeling like someone was standing near the bed. If you can believe it, February got even worse. Sometimes we'd hear what sounded like someone pacing in the guest room at night. I finally locked that door and put a towel under the crack because the smell had gotten so bad. Work started to suffer. I couldn't focus, and Matt was irritable all the time. We'd jump at small noises, and the house started to feel like it wasn't ours anymore. Then, one night in March, I had this dream where I was being chased by an old man. He had this really long neck that would wobble around as he ran. That might sound kind of funny, but in my dream I was terrified. He reached out for me, and then I woke up with 3 scratches on my left arm. They weren't deep, but they were long and thin, like from a cat, except Tom wasn't allowed in the house. We kept him strictly in the barn. I tried to tell myself I'd done it in my sleep, but I like to keep my nails short, so that didn't add up. That was the final straw. We broke the lease early, even though it cost us a couple of $1,000s. Finding a new place took longer than expected, so we ended up staying there until the end of April. Those last few weeks were miserable. Things were constantly being moved again. The cigarette smell got stronger, and one night we both woke up to the sound of the barn door slamming shut. Matt ran out there with a flashlight and found nothing except the snow and Tom hiding behind a hay bale. We finally moved back into an apartment in the city that May. Luckily, the new place allowed pets, so Tom came with us. He's still with us now, happy and spoiled and totally normal. Once we were out, it was like something lifted off of us. The constant anxiety, the short tempers, all of it faded. I don't have an explanation on exactly what happened. Could have been the stress of 2020 with the isolation and all of that, although I do feel that the house did have some kind of presence. Either way, we both felt it, and felt how it changed us. I looked up the property a few months later out of curiosity. The listing photos were still online, and someone new had rented it that summer. I wanted to email the property manager and ask if the new owners had ever mentioned anything strange, but I stopped myself. I figured if they were happy there, it wasn't my place to stir it up again. Anyways, that's my story. This happened last summer, August 2024. My girlfriend and I drove out to Fort Williams Park in Cape Elizabeth to watch the sunset by Portland Head Light. The park itself is open 24/7, so it wasn't a big deal for us to be there after the lighthouse closed. We parked near the upper lot and walked down toward the cliffs to sit and listen to the waves. It was a beautiful evening where the air was heavy with salt and the grass warm from the day. You could hear gulls somewhere out over the water and the waves slapping against the rocks below. We were talking about random things, laughing and holding each other tight, when I heard someone call my name. It wasn't loud, but it cut right through the crash of the water. Someone said, "Evan," clearly, maybe 20 feet away. I thought it was my girl, so I said, "Yeah?" She looked confused and said she hadn't said anything. I tried to shrug it off, figured I was tripping, and there were still a few other people walking back toward the lot, so I could have misheard someone back there. But then, maybe 10 minutes later, it happened again. This time she'd heard it too, because she asked if I'd called her name. We both stood there for a moment, watching the water. The sun was mostly down by then, and a deep blue shadow had settled over everything. We started walking back up the path toward the car. The lighthouse was dark, except for the automated beam sweeping slowly across the horizon. I looked up as we passed the last bit of open field, and that's when I saw him. There was a figure on the narrow walkway that wraps around the lighthouse, on the ocean-facing side. I could make out the shape of a man in old-style rain gear, like a fisherman or lighthouse keeper from years gone by. He wore a heavy coat, hood pulled low, shoulders squared to the sea. I stopped and told her to look. She saw him too. For maybe 3 seconds he stood there, completely still. And then he wasn't. 1 second he was there, and the next the platform was empty. Neither of us saw where he went, and there was no sign he walked away. Later we looked it up. The lighthouse itself isn't manned anymore, and tours ended hours before. The park paths are open, so anyone could walk freely, but no one could have been standing on that walkway at that hour. The place isn't known for ghosts like some other lighthouses in the area, but there have been a few paranormal sightings over the years there. I'm not saying I believe in ghosts. I don't even know what we saw. Maybe it was a keeper from years past. Maybe it was just the ocean and shadows playing tricks. You never really can know sometimes. This happened last fall when my friend and I went on a weekend hiking trip in the Litchfield hills. We were looking for a quiet couple of days in the woods to do some hiking and camping. But instead, we stumbled into something that still leaves me haunted. We were doing some off-trail hiking, exploring side paths and old trails that we found. There is nothing I like more than bushwhacking through the forest. It ignites a feeling of adventure inside of me like nothing else. You never know what secrets you might stumble across out there. But I digress. So we're going through the forest, and that's when we come across an old logging road, completely overgrown and in rough shape. You could still barely see the wheel ruts, and it was clear no one had used it for decades. Curiosity got the better of us, so we followed it. The road twisted through the forest, with dense trees closing in overhead. We were hoping it would lead to an old logging camp or something like that. Every now and then we could hear a deer or the distant trickle of a stream. It was both relaxing and eerie at the same time. There was a sense of foreboding, as if we were somewhere we weren't supposed to be, although that made it all the more exciting to us. It's not like there were any no trespassing signs, so we didn't see the harm in going on. Eventually, the road leveled out, and we noticed a building tucked into the trees. It looked like it could collapse at any minute. The roof sagged, vines had eaten into the walls, and windows were shattered or missing entirely. I'm not going to say exactly where this was, because it was stupid for us to go in. But curiosity is a hell of a thing, and for some reason we went in anyways. Inside it was dark, dusty, and smelled like decay mixed with mildew. Some graffiti covered the walls, but for the most part, it looked like it had been abandoned and left alone for decades. As we walked down the main hallway, we started noticing things that made it obvious this wasn't just some random old building. There were a couple of wheelchairs abandoned in the hall, a gurney pushed against a wall, and metal cabinets that clearly had once held medical supplies. Then we came across one of the rooms that made me stop in my tracks. It had a solid wood desk and a heavy chair bolted to the floor with leather straps at the arms. I don't even want to imagine what that room was used for. I shuddered and kept moving, but the place was too tantalizing to leave. We went in deeper, spurred on by morbid interest. Every room had something that made your imagination run wild. Rusted surgical tools, more wheelchairs, strange markings on walls, and furniture which some of it looked official, maybe military or government. Neither of us thought to take a photo. Somehow that never even crossed our minds. But then we heard it. A thud, deep in the back of the building, followed by footsteps coming down the hall. We killed our lights and ducked into a room, half hidden behind some overturned desks, with our eyes glued to the door the hallway passed by. The steps went right past the doorway, but we never saw anyone walking. My friend and I stared at each other, completely dumbfounded. After a moment, we turned our lights back on. Neither of us was scared enough to leave just yet. The building was way too fascinating. We split up to explore further. I ended up in a room with no windows, checking out what looked like claw marks scratched into the wall. I was leaning closer to get a better look when I thought I heard my friend behind me. So I turned to ask him what he thought the marks were. Instead of it being my friend, it was a man in a white lab coat, walking silently past me and out of the room. Hearing sounds is one thing, but seeing something like that is completely different. I ran immediately and found my friend a few rooms down, white as a sheet, staring into a corner. I had to call his name a couple of times before he even responded. I said we needed to get out, and he agreed. We left as fast as we could and didn't look back until we were well away, back on a proper trail. Later, I asked him what he had been staring at. He told me there was a teenage boy in the corner, bound in a jacket, nose broken and terrified. He said he could feel exactly how scared the kid had been, so much so that he was fighting off a breakdown. We have no clue what that building was used for. Nothing we found online even comes close. I honestly hope it collapses on its own someday, because whatever happened there must have been horrible.
You have been watching Neon Noir, a Radeon production brought to you by Spoopy Cola.